Hi all, it's Lady Aethra here with the February 2022 Paletteful pack. This is actually my first Paletteful pack, and I stream this on Twitch. There will be a link to my link tree in the description as well as on my channel, where you can find my Twitch channel. Apologies in advance for any kind of funky weirdness in this video. As this is a VOD that I edited down and had to speed up quite a bit. I was streaming for about 3.5 hours to pull this together, but let's jump right into the unboxing. So in this month's box, there are these Graphics Aqua Ink pearlescent inks, and I received them in the colors rose gold, pearl blue, gold, pearl red, copper, silver, pearl green, pearl white, and pearl lilac. I know that order might seem a little strange, but that's the order I pulled them out of the box, so that's how I wanted to list them out for you guys. There was not a menu in the box, but all of the items were pretty self-explanatory. These are pretty interesting inks. I use the word ink pretty loosely. It's really just a pigment in I think it's a water-based pigment. It's just what seems to be some micas suspended in water. Let me tell you what it says on the packaging. It says Graphics Aqua Ink Watercolor Ink, ultra brilliant pigmented watercolor ink, water-based. Shake vigorously before use. And yes, they separate pretty quickly. I also received this Pentel dual metallic brush pen. It is a blue violet duochrome paint pen, as well as this Alt Alternatives pigment liner in a 0.5. Nice, good thickness, as well as this Princeton Select Round Brush number 4. There's also this cute sticker of a cat sleeping on a laptop. The last thing in the box, this is me making sure there was nothing else, was this Graphics Aqua Pad paper. It's a 20 sheet pad, 220 GM cellulose paper. It worked pretty well for these inks, I'll say that. I'm also going to do a quick pan over of the inks so you can get a better look of them, as well as the paint marker and the liner. Right after I open up the pad. This paper is pretty thick, and it didn't work too badly with the inks, but you'll see that later in the video. Here's the nice little pan over of the inks. They're honestly a good size. I didn't use very much of them. And a closer look at the pens. I went ahead and used some droppers to fill the ceramic palette so that I could use these easily. Also, I put some of the paint marker into the palette as well. It's actually pretty cool. Instead of the usual like press down on the nib, it has a button at the back for distributing the ink. And it is actually a brush pen, like they're individual bristles. It's not plastic or felt. So it's pretty neat. And here I am just going through and swatching the colors. I started with the white and then went with the silver, gold, copper, rose gold, and then I went with the red, green, blue, and the lilac. I do also swatch the paint marker here, and I'll show the paper to the camera as well in a little bit. I wanted to see how these looked both with the brush saturated and as the brush started to dry out. This is pretty interesting. I noticed that the paper was absorbing the water pretty quickly, and the inks didn't really cling to the brush like watercolor does. So they were a little bit different to use. They're also not very opaque at all. It really is just some fine pigments suspended in water. Here I am doing a little blend test. I also put the inks over the liner to make sure it wouldn't bleed, which it did not, which is great. It's a waterproof liner. And I'm just layering the different materials on top of each other to see how they work, doing a little play before I jump into the artwork. And that kind of square is the marker, and you can see it shifts the different colors. I decided to go with a jewel beetle for the art, just because I felt like the palette kind of suited it. I do wish that I had picked something a little less specific for at first, like maybe just played around with the inks a bit, but I do like where this went. Here I am just doodling out our little beetle dude. I don't know specifically what species this is, but it was one of a longer variety as opposed to the more round beetles. He was mostly green with a bit of blue and some red stripes. I kept the line work pretty simple. I didn't want too much actual line details. It's mostly just the outside and the split for the wing covers and the separation of the head and the little butt. I am about to dive into doing the lines in the ink as well, and you will get a slightly different camera angle soon as well. After the stream, I did realize that my camera setup was not the best for actually seeing what I'm working on, so that is something I'll be addressing in the future. And here I am going in with the liner. I did a quick light erase with my kneaded eraser. I actually quite like this pigment liner. Some other liners I've used in the past have felt a little dry, but this one just glides right on the paper, even on this watercolor, this water aqua pad paper. Okay, it does say it's watercolor paper that has a little bit of tooth to it. It didn't get caught or anything. It went right on. I do appreciate the thicker nib. Like I said, this is a 0.5. I do enjoy a nice detailed small nib as well, but I kind of like the nice beefy lines for this. It kept it really simple. Now I do go in and fill in the antenna as well as the legs for this beetle because they were black in the photo. And I don't have any black inks or any opaque inks really either. You can see I'm just scribbling away. Right now, I do not have a specific schedule for when I'm streaming. I try to stream during the weekend, assuming I'm not sick. But lately I've been having some network issues that I'm trying to resolve before I jump back into streaming. Because one of the issues I had with this stream is that the audio was kind of cutting in and out and the video is a little bit jittery, which is why I'm actually doing this voiceover instead of using the original audio, where I was experiencing everything firsthand and talking through what I was doing. I'm trying to come to a solution for that, and I will keep you updated. And as soon as I can set a more structured schedule for Twitch, I will put it on my channel. I do also plan to convert most of the art content into YouTube videos as well. So if that's what you prefer, I've got you. I am also willing to upload the VODs to YouTube, unlisted, and link them in the video descriptions if that's requested. If no one's interested, I'm not going to do it, but I will upon request. It'll just be kind of a hefty upload, and like I said, there are some audio problems. And here I'm wrapping up the ink for our little bug, and give it one last erase before I jump into painting with these watercolor inks. Kneaded erasers are really helpful because they're a lot more gentle on the paper, and they kind of pick up the pencil instead of rubbing it away, so they don't tear up the paper and they don't tear up any lines. So I jumped straight in with the green. I realized immediately that this was more of a kind of foresty emerald green and less of the kind of yellow green that was actually on the beetle, but I figured I would at least put down a flat coat, and I worked my way around all the outlines and filled them in with a good flat wash. I'd actually be interested in using these inks on a darker tone paper as well. I currently don't have a black paper or even just a darker colored paper, but I was thinking of getting a pack of something like construction paper anyway for a project that I want to work on, so maybe I will do that soon and update you on how these inks look on that paper. I do think these would be a great supplement to a watercolor palette, especially if you don't have one of those fancy palettes with all the gold tones, because all of these colors are pearlescent and really pretty. Just like I said, they're not very opaque. They could also look really nice on top of acrylics or inks, assuming that you have them on a level surface so they won't run, and whatever you're painting on top of will not be activated by the water. One thing I ran into while I was working on this piece, speaking of being activated by water, is that these inks are very easily reactivated. So when I get later in the piece and I start trying to blend some other colors together, it's a bit of a struggle. Speaking of struggles, like I mentioned earlier, this paper is absorbing this water so quickly. So I'm trying to get this nice smooth wash on the paper and leave space for the red parts, but very quickly it just keeps drying up on the brush, and so you can see this kind of rough, scraggly outline, but it still works out in the end, I think. This was all very experimental. If I were to redo this, I think I would approach it slightly differently, but I still had a good time making this. And here I am taking some of the gold and a little bit of the white, trying to make a more yellow-green. I don't think I was very successful, to be honest. Instead of making a nice light yellow-green, I just made a gold-green instead. At the end, it ends up still looking okay. I think it worked out. I go in later with some different colors, and you'll see how that works out. But it's just, at this time, I was starting to worry because the green was just not the tone I was looking for. And it was just such a flat color that I was worried I was not going to get the dimension that I wanted. But here I am going in with the red. It's looking very vibrant against that green since I left that white space. And I didn't draw lines for this. I just freehanded it. But these shapes were pretty simple, so I felt pretty good about just jumping right in. Something I noticed about excuse me, about the red on the wing covers as opposed to the red on the upper body portion. I don't know my insect terms offhand. Is that this part here was a little bit darker, so that's why I did have the green underneath, because that helped tone down and neutralize the red just a little bit. Some good color theory in action here. So I've got these little red stripes added in, and I'm just filling them out up to the green lines, making sure they're as opaque as I can get them with these watercolor inks, and then going back in with the green and smoothing the lines out up against the red. I'm also adding a tiny bit of blue into the green to try to start shading a bit and getting a bit more dimension right around the edges where it's, curved down so it would be more in shadow. I didn't add so much blue that it turned like aqua or turquoise, but it was just enough to give it a little bit of deepness in a darker tone. And here I'm trying to explain that there is a dip down the middle of its back because the two wing covers are curved, so it's not a smooth surface. So I'm going in and shading down the middle of his back as well, because that would also be a lower point. It's also bringing that thin line that I drew down between the wing covers back into visibility, I'll say. Here I'm taking a bit more of that green with the gold and shading down the higher parts of the wing covers because they have a little bit of shine to them. And I also used a bit of rose gold. After it dried, I went in with a white Posca, which I guess is cheating because it was not part of the box, but I felt like this little guy could use some highlights. So here I am just adding a few to the legs, and then also to the shiny wing covers and the eyes of our little beetle guy. And I will show the camera the finished piece as well, just briefly. At the end of the video, I will have a bit of a pan over the piece as well, so you'll get a closer look. You also get a tiny sneak peek of the next piece, because I did go ahead and draw another bug as well. I wanted to try to draw a snail because some of the tones were so earthy with the rose gold and the gold and the copper. So here I am struggling to draw a snail shell. I was having a hard time wrapping my head around how the shell works in 3D without having one in my hands. I had a photo reference, as you can see, but it's just not quite the same when you're trying to put it on a 2D surface. So I redrew this a few times and eventually just moved on to the body out of frustration, which I think that part turned out pretty well. I think the head is, pretty cute, all things considered. I think snails are cute. If you don't, that's cool, but I like them quite a bit. And I made sure to include his little eye stalks and his little, nose? I don't know. I don't know the snail anatomy very well either. And here I am trying to fix this shell. And I just said, you know what? I give up. After a few tries. One final go of it. It was a good swirl, and then I just went right on in with the liner. I couldn't be bothered anymore. It was almost dinner time, and I just wanted to get the ink down on the paper. So here I am lining the fleshy bits of the snail and drawing his little foot, and then erasing all that pencil. Now it looks very simple without the pencil lines. It did look a bit flat, so I went in with the liner and tried to give the illusion of some curve to the shell, following the lines of how the shell is built up over time as the snail grows and matures. So that kind of helped round it out instead of it looking like a flat shape. I also went in and jotted out uh, the little underneath part where they move around on. And I gave it one last good erase before I jumped in with the pearl white. I wanted to give this kind of a shimmery base before I started going in with the other tones. Snails are wet, so I figured the pearl white would be a good start, because they're always a little bit glistening and shiny. So after I fill in all of the snail body, including the eye stalks and the little like nose part, I jumped in with the rose gold because it was my lightest kind of natural metallic tone, and started filling in the shell. I ran into that same issue where the brush was getting dry very quickly, so it took a few tries or a few dips into the ink to actually get the whole thing filled out. After this base layer on the shell, I went in with the rose gold on the snail itself and started giving him a little bit more color, especially down at the part closest to the shell, because the reference I was looking at had almost an ombre color from the tip of its face down to the back of its foot, and it was darkest in the back. And it had all of these, this really interesting pattern, and almost looked kind of veiny, but not in a nasty way. It's just this nice mottled pattern. So here I am going in and adding that to our snail friend without getting too stuck in the details, as I was ready for dinner at this point. We actually had food on the way, and I was trying to get the snail done before it arrived. And I'm going in now with the copper to give some dimension to the shell, again to add more to that 3D effect. It's round, it's kind of conical at the same time. The ridges are deeper and more in shadow, and I think that really helped a lot. Then I pulled out the gold and I started adding some highlights to some of the higher points, just because it was a less deep tone and a bit more shiny than the copper, and just continued to add on that shading and give it more dimension. Also added a shadow under the shell onto the snail. And I think this was about it. And now here's the close-up of the beetle with its highlights. And it's signed and all dry. I think it came out alright, all things considered. I actually like it. And here's a better view of the snail.